My name is Sarah Everhard, and this afternoon I am interviewing James Hatch at the Atlanta History Center. The date is April 7th, 2004. And if you'd like to introduce yourself.
And my name is Jim Hatch. When I was in the Navy, it was Captain James Chambers Hatch, U.S. Navy, retired. And birthday was 5/22/24.
Oh, okay, thank you. What we're going to do, what I'd like to ask you about to get started was just about how you ended up in the military. What got your interest going in that? You're a graduate of the Naval Academy, and what led you in that direction?
My hometown was Uniontown, Alabama, and I went to school there for about 11 years, and it looked like there was going to be a war, and so I went for my last year, my 12th year, I went to Marion Military Institute, and I got a scholarship over there, and in fact, to blow the bugle. And so I was a bugler, and so everybody else went out marching around, and I went and blew the bugle and had a different thing. Now, one thing that was kind of interesting over there, blowing the bugle, one night somebody woke me up in the middle of the night and said, "Run out and blow a fire call. Your barracks is on fire." And I said, "I don't know fire call." "Well, blow anything, blow reveille." So I went out and I blew reveille and everything at the North Barracks. I walked down to the South Barracks and blew it, East Barracks and the West Barracks. I came back and my room had burned up. Every bit of clothes and everything I had burned up. And so about 2 or 3 weeks later, 3 people I knew real well weren't there. And they were my ex-roommates. I just transferred from their room to a 2-man room. And those 3 people were kicked out because they set the fire. So I was lucky that I was not associated with them. So anyway, I went to Marion Military Institute, and incidentally, my father went there before me, and he was a cadet captain and captain of the baseball team and things like that. And but that wasn't the reason I went, but it's just as a side bit. And so when I went there, I thought I wanted to go to West Point. And so my brother and I asked the congressman if we could get an appointment at West Point. He said no, but if you can pass the exam, you can go to Annapolis. So I was lucky, really, going into the Navy instead of West Point. But I passed the exam, and so I went to the Naval Academy. And
Now, you were at the Naval Academy for during World War II. That's
yes,
correct.
I was there. I graduated in '46, and some of the things that I remember was that I was glad to get plebe year over with, and because they were really rough on us, and I became very interested in handball as a sport. My roommate, Ed Deremy, had played handball when he went to Tulane, and he showed me how to play. And he was on the varsity football team. And so I kept practicing handball, and I became the #1 guy at Naval Academy for handball. So one year, we had an exchange weekend in West Point. So I challenged the #1 handball player at West Point and bet my bathrobe. And so he beat me, and I lost my bathrobe. But then I challenged their #2 guy, and I won his bathrobe, and I still have his bathrobe.
Oh,
But that was exciting, and also I got a chance to play the national champion. I went down to Washington one weekend from the Naval Academy, and I watched the national championship, and then I went down and introduced myself afterwards, and I said, how about bringing a team down to the Naval Academy and playing us? So I got a chance to play the national champion. Naturally, he beat me, but it was like 21-10, 21-9, but
you know, when you were at the Naval Academy with World War II going on, what was the atmosphere like there, and how did that affect, you know, the student life, or the as opposed to being like a non-wartime experience?
Well, I actually, you're so busy at the Naval Academy. I mean, they have everything planned for you, especially plebe year. I mean, you tell you what time to wake up, and you start doing exercises, and you go to breakfast, and you're right in a class. You go till lunchtime, and and then they go have classes all afternoon, and then when you finish classes in the afternoon, they say you have to go out and play a sport. So one of the things I tried out for was cross country, and plebe year, and I ran cross country, but it felt like the inside of my lungs were on fire. But Jimmy Carter was there at that time. He's my classmate. And
in the same class?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the only time I ever met him. He wasn't very conspicuous about anything. I mean, he's very quiet, but he did well in academics and whatnot.
Were there, even though you graduated after the war had ended, during the time you were there, as graduation took place, were some of them going directly into the war, or as graduation?
Well, the war was over, I think in 45, yeah, and I graduated in 46.
Okay.
But my first, I thought I wanted to be an aviator, and my first duty was on board an aircraft carrier, and I was the assistant gunnery officer and assistant engineering officer, and things like that. And I remember being assistant gunnery officer. My room was over here, and I had to run the entire ship from general quarters, and so we had a 5-inch 38, I believe, at the fantail back in the back. But it was an interesting tour. But one of the highlights for the tour was that we took Admiral Byrd on his last trip to the South Pole, and we went through the Panama Canal, and we went right down to the Ross Ice Shelf at the South Pole, and he took off an airplane that had wheels with skis. It retracted the wheels after they took off, and they landed on skis down at the South Pole. But I remember him standing at the top of the gangway when he came aboard, and I was the officer of the deck at that time, so my bosun mate was blowing his whistle, and Admiral Byrd was standing at the top of the gangplank to get his picture taken. So the bosun mate got tired of blowing, and he finally stopped. But that was interesting, going through the Panama Canal and going down.
How long did all of that take?
Well, the trip, I would guess about a month. And we crossed the equator. And when you cross the equator, there's a big initiation. And they have all the enlisted men and the officers who have crossed it before. in a big long line, and they have paddles that you have to run down, and they have all sorts of initiation. And then the King Neptune, he was bare in his chest, and he had grease on him, and everybody had to go up and kiss his chest so to be initiated. So anyway, I was on the Philippine Sea, CV-47, and then as I mentioned, I thought I wanted to be an aviator, but in 1946, all of the flyers were usually in the wardroom most of the time because they had a shortage of gasoline and they couldn't fly. So they were playing bridge and poker, and we had slot machines at that time. And so they were playing all the time in the wardroom. I said, I don't want to do that. So next I thought I wanted to be a submariner. So I went up to New London, and they took me down 100 feet underwater and let me escape and swim to the top, you know. And then I went out on a submarine, and it really bothered my ears because they had a snorkel and to get air from above, and then every time a wave hit the snorkel, it causes the air pressure to go down, which is like being in an airplane and going up to 5,000 feet, back down to 5,000, back to zero. And I didn't like that either. But so they sent me to a small ship. We had 3 officers and about 50 men in Guam. And it was a weather ship. And the 3 officers, one was the captain, one was the exec, and one was me. So I had all the duties from navigator to gunnery officer to engineering officer, and so at an early part of my career, I had all this experience, and we would get underway every morning. And we would go back to the position where we had drifted, and then we would, and so I was on that for about a year, and they transferred me to, oh, incidentally, my storekeeper on that ship in Guam, he had a hard time finding things because when the World War II was over, everybody left, and they didn't keep any records in the supplies, but he would go over and find the wiping rags and the toilet paper and all those things, and he would bring it back. But then we got ordered to go back to the States. And we stopped in Hawaii and had a nice liberty there, and went out on the town, and I was single. And then we got underway after about 2 days, I think it was, because we had taken on some provisions. And I remember going up like that and down like that in the waves, and then over like that and over like that. So I had to take my bucket up to the bridge to stand the watch. The captain wasn't going to stand the watch. So the executive officer and I stood the watch. But we went to San Diego, and we were there for a couple of weeks. Then they sent us to through the Panama Canal and then up the Mississippi River to New Orleans to decommission the ship. Oh. And so it turned out that the captain got transferred and the exec got transferred, and so I was a commanding officer as an ensign. And then they had a ship they wanted to sell to the Greeks, and so I got sent to that ship, and we put it in commission, got all the supplies, and went down to Mississippi and around Florida, and when we went up to Norfolk. And the Greeks came aboard, and we didn't need to train them because they already knew how to do things. The first time the Greeks this Greek captain got the ship underway, we were in the Finger Piers in Norfolk, which is very close quarters. There are a lot of ships in the Finger Piers. And the captain says, "I sciorta mauvais," and that means full speed astern. So he knew what he was doing, but it scared the heck out of me. But so they took over the ship and took it back to Greece. So then I was transferred to a small ship, a PC, and in Newport, Rhode Island. And it was a PC 579, I believe it was. And our mission was to train officers on how to bring ship into the port, and then how to dock, and how to navigate the ship and so forth. And but right after the war, there wasn't a lot of officers. There weren't very many officers left. I mean, they all went home. So they had a shortage on all these ships, not only officers but enlisted men too. Yeah. So they needed an officer in Key West. So they transferred me to Key West, and this was a PCS in Key West. And the skipper of this PCS liked to go out on the town and get drunk. And he would come aboard at midnight and ring the general quarters for everybody to man their battle stations, you know. So it was quite interesting. But I was the number 2 there, the executive officer down there. That lasted, I don't know, 6 months or so. And they transferred me back to Rhode Island to another patrol craft, PC. And I would think I was on there about a year. And I thought, I'm getting tired of all this going from one ship to the other. And all these small ships did not have a supply officer. But being the junior officer aboard, I had to get the supplies, so I began to like what I was doing on a ship without a supply officer. So I requested to be transferred to the Supply Corps, and went to Bayonne, and it's supposed to be a year's school, but the Korean War started, and they cut it to 6 months, and they sent me to 2 more ships. They sent me to a ship, APA 32, which was a Calvert, and we put it in commission there in Norfolk. And then we went through the Panama Canal again and around to San Francisco, and picked up Marines and Army people to go to the Korean War. And we were very crowded, and we I don't think we even stopped to Japan, but we went to we might have, yeah, but yeah, I think we did stop Japan. This was about 1951 and maybe 1950. But anyway, the Japanese didn't have any cars at that time, so I remember a taxi was a coal-burning car. They burned coal to make the taxis go. So we had a few days liberty, but then we took the Marines and the Army troops to Korea and landed at Incheon. Incheon was one of the worst places you can go into. It has so many islands, it's difficult to do. But we sent them all over the shore, and then for all that trip, they rewarded us and sent us to Hong Kong for a week. So we had my first trip to Hong Kong, and so then we went back to the States, and I got transferred to another ship, which was the AO-69, and I was a supply officer on this ship. And one of the most memorable things of that trip, that ship, was that we went up to the Arctic Circle at Thule, Greenland, and we had icebergs bumping into us all the time. We sent the mail boat ashore, and the icebergs closed in, and the mail boat was sitting on top of the ice. But anyway, I forgot to tell you about, I met my wife.
Tell us that story.
All right. Well, our ship, the AO-69, was in the shipyard in Brooklyn. And I used to go over to, they had a dance in the main ballroom of the Biltmore Hotel every Friday, and they let naval officers come in. So I went over one night, and a classmate of mine from Annapolis introduced us about 10 o'clock. And I kept looking over at that pretty girl, and I got to dance with her, and she was always busy. And finally, at 1:45, I was getting a little desperate, and they played a samba. I knew how to do the samba because I'd just gone to Art Demers to learn the samba. So I cut in on her. And I danced with her one dance, mostly one dance, and I went back to my ship and told my roommate I just met the girl I'm going to marry.
You knew it right there.
I knew it. And she was not only pretty on the outside, she was pretty on the inside. I could tell how nice a person she was. And she was a wonderful Navy wife. And somebody would ask her, which station did you like best? She said, well, the station I was at the time. Okay. So we got married. And well, first of all, the fellow who introduced us, Commander Frank Owens, of all the people to come and relieve me up at near the North Pole, Frank Owens, he got orders to relieve me. And he arrived in New York City, and he couldn't find an airplane to go up to Thule, Greenland for 30 days. And I've got all these love letters that we kept, and so I was reading them, well, for our 50th wedding anniversary, I was reading them to my wife, and one of them said, they were kidding me. I wrote about the people on the ship. They just saw Frank go by on an iceberg. So anyway, he finally got there, and we came back and got married, and we had a 21-day honeymoon, and our first 2 nights with the Pierre Hotel in New York City, and then we went up to New England to Vermont and New Hampshire, and came back to a little place in Brooklyn Heights, and then I went to school for the Navy Exchange, and we went as a married couple out to Great Lakes.
Now you brought a copy of your wedding photo, which I'm going to see if I can get you to hold that up there.
All right.
And before we go any further, I'm going to have you tell the story about the swords in that picture.
All right.
If you hold up a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Hold the picture up just
Hold back like that?
Yeah, okay, great.
All right.
Thank you, yes. Now we've got a shot of that on the film too.
Well, this was in August of 1952 that I arrived back in New Jersey, and we wanted to have a military wedding. and they didn't have any swords in the Navy at that time. And so I went over to a costume place in New York City, and these are the swords we got. They're wooden swords, but they look just like good ones. And so we had a great military wedding, and my brother Ed Hatch was my best man. And so he incidentally was the president and chairman of the board of Georgia Power. And so I always had a challenge to play tennis with him. The first time I played him was in Uniontown, Alabama, when I was about 15, and I thought I was a pretty good tennis player. And he says, well, I'll play you with a 2x4. So he, instead of using a racket, he used a 2x4, and he beat me. So that was a challenge. So every time I met him from then on, I wanted to play him. And incidentally, finally, when I came back from Vietnam, well, that's getting a little ahead of myself. I asked him to play tennis, and he said, I'm not playing anymore. He says, play my son.
Handed it off.
But anyway, we were there in Great Lakes, and I was the assistant Navy exchange officer there at Great Lakes. And I mentioned handball earlier, so I was played handball at the YMCA, and I entered tournaments, national tournaments. Well, I won the YMCA championship, and then I lost in the state championship, but I played in national tournaments there, and that was a lot of fun. But you know, I believe that everybody needs to have a balanced life. You know, you have work, you have hobbies, and you have athletics, and to keep in condition, and you have church responsibility. So, but in any case, we enjoyed our tour there. But then they sent us to China Lake, California. It was a Naval Ordnance Test Station, and there I was a Navy exchange officer. And I would go to these parties, and all the wives would come up to me and says, you know, you're out of stock in stockings, size 9. I said, well, yeah, I wrote it all down, you know, and made sure I had to get that. But being in the desert is interesting, and
very different experience.
yeah. Well, one of the most unusual experiences was there was a security officer who had filed claims for uranium right around the edge of the base, and he sold his claims for $1 million back in 1954. And so my neighbor and I and a couple of others got real interested in that. So we bought a scintillator, which is a Geiger counter, and we would go on weekends. We would go up in the mountains and try to find uranium. And you point the scintillator towards a patch of rocks, and if it goes whang, then you know there's probably uranium over there. But one time we were there, we go out Friday night, and I woke up on Saturday morning, and I was in my sleeping bag right in the desert, you know, and I looked up, and there was a mountain lion about that far from my face, and I pulled the sleeping bag over my head, and I looked out, and he was gone. But another time, we were driving along. I was looking this way. No, I was looking this way, I guess it was. And my partner was driving, and I was looking over that way. and I saw this woman. She didn't have any clothes on. We're walking across the desert to her trailer, and she was just walking slowly, you know. I says, "Hal, look at this." And Hal says, he was looking the other way, and he says, "Yeah, that looks like good uranium." I said, "No, Hal, over here." So anyway, so we had fun, and you know. But, then we got orders to Japan, and I left out some important things. Our first child was born in Great Lakes, 9 months and 8 days after we were married. It was a daughter, Maureen, and she's a wonderful daughter. And we took her across country with us. We stopped at the Grand Canyon and things like that. But then we had the next child at China Lake, my son James Hatch Jr., or Jimmy. And so when we were transferred to Japan, I was able to get on the President Cleveland to go over there, which was a civilian ship. And so we had 2 children, Maureen and Jimmy, on the ship, and they were very young. And when we arrived in Yokohama, they didn't have quarters for us on the base, so we had to find a Japanese house, and we found one in Hayama to rent. And it was only a couple of blocks from the Emperor's summer palace, but it was, we slept on tatami mats, and we did get a maid who was Sumiko, who was just a great person. But she would cook everything and take care of our children, and she would build a fire under the big pot that we took a bath in, and we'd take a hot bath and have a little sake and then pull the blankets up, turn out the fires, and go to sleep. And so we'd put our children in snowsuits. But it was interesting living in a Japanese house, but it was kind of cold there for a while.
And you were in Japan, how long was this?
4 years. I was on the staff of ComNav Phi, which is Command of Naval Forces Far East, and then they changed it to Command of Naval Forces Japan. And they asked me to write a staff study on the feasibility of taking over the PX in Yokohama from the Army Air Force to the Navy. So I told them wrote this big paper and told them how to do it. Then they looked around and they said, "Well, who are we going to send up there?" "Well, let's send him." So they transferred me to Yokohama and took over the PX and the commissary store. But one real interesting thing was we had about 1,000 Japanese working for me, and I had couple of good supervisors that I hired. But the 2 American supervisors, they said, "Well, we have some people we really don't want to hire for the Navy who were with the Army Air Force." So we were able to let go about 200 Japanese people without a labor union problem. So that was a coup. But so it was a big PX and very, very interesting. So then I finally got orders from Japan. Oh, we had our 3rd child born in Japan. John Benjamin Francis Hatch, and my wife wanted to have her grandfather's name, and I wanted to have my father's name. No, it's her father and my father. So John is her father, and mine was Benjamin Francis. So he goes by Ben. So we have one of our children born in Japan. So, but it was an interesting place to be. And one night we were coming back from a party about midnight and out to our Japanese house, and we went through the town of Hayama, which is where we lived. A very little town, but just a lot of. And there was this Japanese fellow. He looked like he weighed about 250 pounds. He'd just been to the sauna, and he had his towel over his shoulder, and he was walking down the street. So not a stitch of clothes on. But
Just taking it easy.
then we made some interesting trips there. We went up to Nikko, where all the castles were and everything. We went down to Kyoto, and so I worked hard, but our family had a good time over there. And Sumiko was with us the whole time, and so that was really nice.
What was the attitude towards Americans at that time?
Oh, they loved Americans, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, did you happen to stay in touch with her at all?
No, I lost track of her, but I'd wanted to marry her and have a second wife, bring her back, but I couldn't do that.
You were there a total of 4 years in Japan.
Yeah.
And now were you, but you had done your last trip to Korea. You had done one trip to Korea. That was from the States before that.
Yes.
That's right. Okay. All right. Well, I'll let you pick it up.
All right. Well, we got orders from Japan with our 3 children, and this was a MST, which is a military sea transport service. It wasn't as fancy as the one we had going over to Cleveland, President Cleveland. But our youngest son, Ben, we had to put a little halter on him so he wouldn't fall overboard. But we arrived in San Francisco, and I had wanted to get a car while we were over in Japan, and one time I went up to their Eiffel Tower, which is the same as and had lunch with a Chinese fellow, and I was negotiating with him to buy a Jaguar. And I remember I made an offer for $3,400, and he said no, $3,500, and we parted, and so that didn't materialize. So then I was able to get a trip to Hong Kong just before I left. And my wife wanted to go to Hong Kong, but we didn't get her there. But when I got to Hong Kong, I bought a Volkswagen. And so the Volkswagen arrived in San Francisco. And so we had 3 children. You had my daughter in the front seat, my wife on the back seat, and on each side of her was a son. And on top of the Volkswagen, there was a suitcase, a Coleman stove, and it was 2 suitcases, a Coleman stove and a refrigerator. And we were loaded with stuff, so we started driving across country, and we stopped in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and places like that. And we stopped in Yellowstone National Park. We saw the geyser and took pictures of the deer and things, and the bear. The bears would come right up to the Volkswagen, and one night I took my daughter to see the grizzly bears. And we parked the Volkswagen, and the grizzly bears walked right alongside to this garbage place, and they were bigger than the Volkswagen. I mean, they were huge things, but it was an interesting experience. So we got to Great Lakes. Great Lakes, this time I was the assistant supply officer at Great Lakes. And I was, let's see, a lieutenant commander at that time. And we had 3 years in Great Lakes and had a great boss, Captain Sharrocks, and I guess I made commander there, and so I have to tell you about the one in Japan. I made lieutenant commander in Japan, and my wife called up 100 people to come to our house to celebrate during Christmas holidays, right after Christmas, and she thought, well, somebody won't come. Every one of them came.
And this was at your house in Japan?
Yeah, well, I mean, we only had two bedrooms.
Yeah. So you had an overflow.
Yeah. So we lived in the city of Waukegan, and I went back to the YMCA and took up handball and tennis and all that kind of stuff. But then we had another child in Great Lakes, Kevin Taylor Hatch, and so 2 were born in Great Lakes, 1 in China Lake and 1 in California, and it was a very nice tour, and we lived out in Waukegan, and they started a tennis program at the YMCA for teaching tennis, and tennis was my other sport, and so they asked me to be an assistant teacher. We had about 300 kids there, and so I got all of my 4. No. I just got 2 or 3 of them, and 3 of them I guess, in the tennis program. But we couldn't get Kevin in there because he was just born there in 1961. And we were transferred to Philadelphia to the Defense Industrial Supply Center, which was all the armed forces in one group handling industrial supplies. And while I was there, I was in stock control at first, and they transferred to me I was director of finance, and so.
And what time period was this? About what year?
This was 1960 to 63, I guess.
So prior
No, 60 to 63.
Okay, so prior to Vietnam then.
Yeah, but maybe 62 to 60. It had to be 65 because the admiral came over to me one day, and they just bombed the embassy in Vietnam, and this was about April of 65, and they said, we need you to go to Vietnam War. And so he says, why don't you go home and talk it over with Lynn? He'd said, I was a commander at that time, and so I went home and I said, let's go out to have lunch. And so I went to the Inn of Full Falls. I had a couple of martinis and we were talking it over. And my wife Lynn says, well, you've been trained for this for all your life. I could have gotten out of it. I mean, but I said, well, my country needs me. I'm going to go. So anyway.
So the family stayed in Philadelphia?
Yes, I stayed in Philadelphia. So I left my wife with a 6-month-old baby, another baby.
Philadelphia baby.
Robert Adams Hatch.
So you had one daughter and
4 sons.
And 4 sons after.
So he's a commander in the Navy Reserves now, but he's not on active duty. But again, I was playing handball in Philadelphia. I went down to play downtown, and my daughter called me up and says, "Dad, you better get home." It says, "Mom has to go to the hospital for the baby." so I rushed home and we went to the hospital.
And she was what, about
What?
herself? She was just little herself?
She was 11.
Oh, 11, okay.
Yeah, 11, yes.
Yeah.
So, well, also, my son was, well, they all started playing tennis, and so I was able to get a membership in the Germantown Racket Club, Germantown Lawn Tennis Association. They had grass courts, which was very nice, and so. But anyway, I went to Vietnam, and I was 40 years old when I left, and I arrived on my birthday. I was 41, going to war, and I was primarily in Saigon, but I flew to Da Nang and other places, and when I arrived there, we were supporting 35,000 people in the country, and we were responsible for all the supplies for all the armed forces, the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard. Now the Marines landed in Da Nang, and the first thing, they sent me a secret message and said, "We don't want any hamburger meat, we want steak and beer." So, so we had to send them steak and beer, naturally. But as I said, I took a trip to Da Nang to see how, check with what was going on and everything by helicopter, and I didn't realize it was so dangerous at the time. But when I got up there, I went to the PX, and at the entrance to the PX, they had 100 bodies stacked like that on top of each other, 50 on each side, and they were Viet Cong, and the Marines wanted to make an example of them, and so, but that's the most gruesome thing I think I have seen. So anyway, they gave us a 2-day R&R while we were there, and so I got to go down to Bangkok for 2 days. But I guess the scariest part about Vietnam, well, I would go out and eat lunch, and almost every time I went out, I could hear what during lunch period, 3 or 4 bombs going off in the area, and so we were very carefully. The car that took us into the base at the headquarters support activity, they stopped at the main gate, and they had a pole with a mirror on the end of the pole, and they would look underneath, see if there was any bombs on it. And I was supposed to be over there a whole year, and I was, but 363 days, and I was expecting my wife to meet me in Spain. The bomb went off in our hotel, and I was in the shower, didn't have a stitch of clothes on, and my roommate just had a pair of shorts on, and I got out of the shower, and it kept up. It was guns. There was a Army officer right above us, and he was shooting down in the street, and they were shooting back up, and so there were bullets coming in the room. So I'm not anxious for.
Saigon.
Yeah, I wasn't anxious for get a Purple Heart. And I started crawling out in the hall, and my roommate says, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm crawling the hell out of here. I want to get out of this flying glass." You know, there were a number of people who got cut by flying glass who got Purple Hearts, but I didn't want a Purple Heart. So this went on for 45 minutes, the shooting, the machine guns and everything. And I looked out in the street, after it was quiet, and there were 13 people dead and 30 wounded out in the street. And so I told my roommate, I said, well, I had not wanted to get my elephants before, because I didn't want to send a ceramic elephant to my wife if I wasn't coming back. And so I went out and bought 4 ceramic elephants and had them shipped back. And we met in Madrid, and I went to India. I stayed one night in New Delhi, and in Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and met my wife in Madrid. And we had 21 great days in 7 countries, in Spain, and we were in Rome, and Greece, Athens, Greece, and Vienna, Austria, and then we went to Paris and London and Dublin. So we had a great trip there. And I got back to the States, and I was in the aviation supply office. And when I walked into the driveway of my home, they had a big flag out, "Welcome home, Dad."
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
I bet. How was the communication while you were in Vietnam? Were there many telephone calls, mainly letters, or how was it?
No telephone, but I had a tape recorder, and I would send her a tape, and she'd send me one back. So that was the...
And the kids would do the tape with...
Yeah, and letters. So, but I was glad. And incidentally, I got my medals, and these first 3 were World War II, with American Theater and Victory Medal.
I'll get you to hold that up. Yeah, there we go. We got that on the screen now. Okay. So
Okay.
the one in your right hand there that you were telling me.
These first 3 were from American Theater, but this one is a Meritorious Service Medal, and this is a Navy Commendation Medal, and I got that in Vietnam. And this one is Korea, and this is Korea, and this is Vietnam, and this is Korea. And this, I didn't mention this, but this one here is the Antarctic Service Medal. And when I was in my final duty station in Rhode Island, we were responsible for all the supplies for Antarctic, for the South Pole. And so, I got this when we took Admiral Byrd, but I did make another trip right down to the pole. And when we landed at the pole, it was 40 degrees below zero. And I think you have a picture in the file there of me at the South Pole. But
This one?
yeah, that one. Yeah, this was 40 degrees below zero, and they told me that don't take off your hat for over 25 seconds, otherwise your face will freeze. But they put up a barber's pole here, and the people who had been down there put little signs on the thing saying how far to Elk Lake, Michigan, and Washington, D.C., and various places. I think one of them says Paris, but that was my last tour of duty when I went to Rhode Island, that I got sent down there to New Zealand, and then fly from New Zealand over to McMurdo, and we landed on the ice, and then we flew another 400 miles, I believe, over Antarctica to the South Pole. And it's about 5,000 feet of ice there at the South Pole. And the Navy was responsible for taking care of the scientists down there, and the scientists were doing research. And they asked me if I want to be a member of the Polar Bear Club, and I said, well, what do I have to do? You take off all your clothes and run around the South Pole. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. So anyway, we retired. I retired from the Navy, and my wife retired from the Navy in 1972. We came down to Atlanta, and I wanted to be a stockbroker or a finance advisor, but they were commission jobs, and I had 5 children to send to college, and my mother-in-law lived with us. God bless her soul, and she was a great mother-in-law, but she lived with us for 19 years. So, but anyway, in Atlanta here, I was with North Side Realty and commercial real estate, and for 2 years I was their top producer. And then I decided to open my own company, and I was totally of 20 years in commercial real estate, but I'm just about retired.
You're still playing a little bit. You're still working a little bit in real estate?
Well, not a little bit, not very much, no.
Now, what brought you to Atlanta? Was there anything in particular, or?
Well, I wanted to come back south.
Yeah.
I didn't want to go to Alabama because there was only 2,000 people in Uniontown, Alabama, and my brother was over here in Atlanta, and he was the president of Georgia Power and then the chairman of the board, and so I thought, well, Atlanta is a nice city, a big city, and there's probably a lot of opportunity here, so that's why. And we didn't have any more children moving out.
No, I was going to say, Philadelphia, the child in Philadelphia was the last one.
Last one, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I was looking over, just wanted to make sure we didn't leave anything out here that, I'm looking over a list of some of the that you had given us last time. If you want to glance over here and see if there's anything that anything else you wanted to tell us, or anything.
All right, let's see. No, I think. Well, I sang for 7 years in the Holy Spirit choir, and I was a member of the Midtown Rotary Club, and a life member of the Naval Academy Alumni Association, and a life member of the Capital City Club. And my great-great-great-grandfather, Governor Benjamin Ogle, owned the Naval Academy Alumni House.
Oh.
And I didn't know anything about it, and I didn't get interested in genealogy until about 15 years ago. And
is that one of your hobbies now?
That's one of my hobbies. And I went to the first reunion of the Talos in the Octagon House. I don't know. The Octagon House is in Washington, D.C. And Colonel John Taylor III was a good friend of George Washington. And George told him, don't build in Philadelphia, build here in Washington. And this is one of the oldest houses in Washington. It was built about 1799. And when the White House burned, President Madison and Dolly came over to the Octagon House to live. And so the reason they hadn't burned that because the French ambassador was living there also. But it's John Taylor III, Colonel John Taylor, had 15 children. And so the house is about 3 or 4 stories, and it's open to the public. But this genealogy, I'm also a member of the. I'm a Magna Carta Baron, a descendant of the Knights of the Garter, and a member of the Jamestown Society, and a member of Americans of Royal Descent, Sons of the American Revolution, and the VFW and American Legion.
All that keep you busy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we still love to dance.
Oh.
And our favorite dance is the samba.
And where in Atlanta do you go out dancing?
Well, we were fortunate to have dancing for years at the Capital City Club, at the Mirador Room downtown. But they made a big ballroom and stopped having dances down there. And so one place we go is the VFW Hall, and in South Atlanta. And it's a beautiful dance floor and everything. But my wife and I celebrated our 40th, 45th, 50th, and 51st wedding anniversary in New York. And we always go back to the Rainbow Room. And it's a great place to dance.
Well, let me see. We're just over an hour on this. Everything is, yep. I'm going to go ahead and stop the tape at this point. Okay, we're recording again. There you go.
I just want to mention my grandchildren. And I have a granddaughter, Leah, and a grandson, Kevin Talo Hatch, and we call him Talo. We're the ancestors, and Kyle. Now, it just so happens that Talo looks exactly like me when I was younger.
How old is he now?
He's 9.
And do they live here?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
You want a picture?
Of course, I would love to see a picture. Yeah. That's wonderful. They're so close that you get to be here in town. Are all your grandchildren here? Or?
Yeah, I just have 3.
Okay.
And my son, the commander, is married, but and also that's Robert. Also Maureen, my daughter, but they don't have children. So, and she lives in La Jolla, California. So.
Okay.
So
these are, and how old are the other grandchildren?
Well, Kyle is 5, Talo is 9, and I've already lined him up to get interested in the Naval Academy.
Yeah.
And then Leah is about 11.
She's the oldest.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me think. Okay, we're recording again.
Okay, my cousin's husband, Beth, and she lived up near Washington. They decided to resign from his job and go to London for a year, take their 3 teenage children, they're all in private school, and then do sightseeing in all over. And they're in Spain right now. But I said, Beth, you've got to become a member of the Descendants of the Knights of the Garter. She said, oh, okay. So I made up all the papers for her, and I said, these are my papers, and you present them, and you'll get in. So she became a member of the Knights of the Garter, and they invited her to stay at Windsor Castle for a weekend. And so she said, while we were there, the prince was walking across the lawn over there, and all the little ladies were talking about it. And oh, there's the prince, there's the prince. And she said to herself, I'm going to go over and meet him. So she walked over towards the prince. All the Secret Service people started descending on her. And then she just had a hand out. And so she shook hands with the prince, and she says, Prince, you know, you're much better looking than your pictures. And so,
Was this Prince Philip?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then she came back to the
They had about 17 people. What did she say? What did he say? What did you say? And so she was so excited about doing all that, and she just,
She saw the opportunity, and
yeah.
that's wonderful. Oh, that's great.